Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. I'm Jessa Morgan. I am SGL's Digital Brand and Marketing Manager, and this is Freight Unfiltered, SGL's webinar series. And we are in part 3 of our Which Transport Method is Right for Me? And today's topic is going to be about trucking. But this series we've been doing, you can find the older videos over on our YouTube channel. We take an honest look at how each major mode of transportation actually works. And I am so excited today to have my colleague here, Wilson Martinez. He is a trucking mastermind from our Houston office, and he is very, very knowledgeable. So, Wilson, please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Wilson Martinez, like Jessa said, and I am in the Sumisho Global Logistics Houston office. So I've been in the industry for about 37 years now, and 28 of those years have been spent at Sumisho Global Logistics. Some of that time in our Houston office, and some of it in our New York office as well, which is where I actually started.
Incredible. So today, like I said, we're covering trucking. And before I get into it, I want to acknowledge something, which is when most people hear trucking, they think, okay, straightforward. Uh, you put cargo on a truck, it goes somewhere. Not a lot of complexity there, right? But that is an assumption that is actually false. And that's exactly what today's session is going to be about. In our experience, the trucking leg of a shipment is often where the timelines start to break down in ways that shippers don't see coming. So rather than walking you through the slides, we're going to do this as a conversation. And what we're going to do is, my slides are not working correctly. There we go. I will ask the questions. Wilson is going to answer, and we'll try to give you a really honest picture of what trucking looks like from a logistics professional's perspective. And then at the end of the session, we will have a 5-minute Q&A. So if you have any questions, share them in the chat. We'll pin them, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the session. And we also have SGL team members in the chat today. Our colleague Mi Tamai is in the chat. So if something comes up during the conversation that she can answer, I'm sure she will be happy to assist you with that as well. But all right, let's get started.
All right.
And let's start, Wilson, with the big picture. So when a shipper says, I just need a truck, what are you actually dealing with that they might not realize?
Well, first of all, trucking is not a commodity, so it's a specific service. So you have different types of equipment that you're going to be dealing with: dry van, a reefer, perhaps flatbed truck, a step deck. You might need drayage of a container, and which would utilize a chassis. Uh, you have pickup and delivery appointments that you might have to meet. You have driver hours of service, traffic and congestion. A simple truck becomes a time sensitive constrained move. Um, Capacity. Trucks are not sitting idle just waiting for cargo next door to you. It may need to deadhead 50 to 200 plus miles to get you the load that you've booked. So trucks are not always where the freight is, and backhaul availability determines pricing and willingness to sometimes pick up the load. Pricing is not just miles times rate. Price is based on capacity, lane, accessorial risk, and equipment availability. So it's a bundle of capacity, timing, risk, compliance, and execution. And most of the cost and complexity from everything around the truck, not the truck itself.
So would you say, no pun intended, there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to booking a truck?
Yes, it's not
And
very
I
simple. Yes, go ahead.
yeah, I actually want to pause here for a quick audience question, because I think that trucking and in general this is a really good example of how everyone's experience with trucking can look a little different depending on what part of the process is causing friction, because there's so many elements to it. So I'm going to throw a poll up on screen, and
Okay.
the which is, what causes the biggest trucking headache for your business today? Please feel free to answer that poll. We'll come back to the results later, but I would love to hear from the group what everyone finds the biggest challenge is. But for now, let's get into the biggest misconceptions that you run into, Wilson, from shippers, specifically about trucking as a transport mode rather than, say, the industry itself. Because a lot of the information out there is more about the industry, but doesn't necessarily talk about the mechanics of trucking as a mode of transport in a larger supply chain.
Well, what I've always heard is if a truck exists, I can get it tomorrow, but that's not the case. Trucking transit is clock strained and not distance strained. You have hours of service that drivers have to follow. So um, also the brakes, traffic, and dwell time can eat into those transit times. Um, Also, capacity positional. Trucks flow toward base lanes. Imbalanced markets create scarcity, and even trucks exist elsewhere. Even if trucks exist elsewhere, I'm sorry. Now, the backhaul economics strongly influence that availability. The biggest misconception is trucking is just physical movement. In reality, it's time constrained, network dependent, facility driven system, and most of the complexity comes from everything around the truck, not just the truck itself. You also have the LTL is cheaper than full truckload. Uh, but LTL and FTL are fundamentally different transports, modes of transport, not just different price points. Like a full truckload is a direct point to point move, one shipper, one truck. An LTL, it's a hub spoke network with consolidation, deconsolidation. LTL moves through network with consolidation and deconsolidation. Um, it can move through multiple terminals and can be handled several times. The LTL price is based on the freight class, the density, stowability, and liability, the weight breaks, uh, the lane plus terminal network costs. Now, sometimes LTL is cheaper when you have small, dense shipments, and an FTL or full truckload is cheaper when you have bulky, near capacity loads. You also have LTL accessorial exposure, which can make a cheap option get expensive very quickly. You have detention, redelivery fees, appointment fees, reclassification fees that could, make it more expensive. So sometimes people think that trucking is always faster than rail. Um, Not true. Sometimes for the short haul distance, trucking is the most is almost always faster and less expensive. But trucking feels trucking feels faster because it's direct. But over longer distances, rail can be just as fast, door to door, and often more consistent. The real trade-off isn't just speed; it's flexibility versus the network efficiency. Um, Transit times are fixed, and they can be impacted by weather, traffic, hours of service, as I mentioned before, and congestion. All right.
That's important. Yeah. Yeah. And then what about, after, I've heard people basically say, like, once the truck is booked, their job is over. How do you see
No,
that?
that's where everything starts, and all the issues around it can, you know, cause the headaches.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not a simple load. I mean, book the truck and you're done with it. Um, Treating trucking as simple leads to higher costs or delays.
Makes sense. So let's talk about now. How does a shipper's trucking decision actually impact the rest of their shipment? Like, like you think about trucking by itself, but when you're combining trucking, especially with ocean or rail, that introduces additional complications. So I'm curious, what your thoughts on, how the inland leg can affect the rest of the shipping process.
Right. So inland trucking is often the failure point because you have cutoff appointments or that you could miss, which will lead to major delays. Small delays cascade into larger issues, which need to be handled quickly, and it can be challenging at times. Truck planning should come first, then build the rest of the shipment around it. The drayage constraints and port congestion will add onto those risks.
Makes total sense. Um, so we haven't had a response to the poll yet. So if you see the poll on screen, please vote on it. We would love to know what is the biggest trucking headache for you. Um, but let's then, talk about one of the other, I think, biggest areas that everyone is seeing right now impacting trucking, and that is the driver shortage.
Yes.
Um, it comes up all the time for a shipper maybe who's not in the day-to-day trenches of the trucking industry. Why should they care about this? How does it actually, affect them?
Well, the fewer drivers, the tighter capacity, and it'll increase rates. Um, you also have issues such as the aging workforce, which leads to fewer drivers, right?
Yeah, of
And then
course.
you have low entry on the new younger drivers coming on board. You have high turnover, which increases the cost pressure for carriers. Um, Practical impact for the shipper is book earlier and less flexibility. LTL is more sensitive to disruption as well.
Makes total sense. And how would you say that shippers are actually responding to this? The different areas where it's affecting people. I mean, there's a shortage of 60,000 truck drivers, and in the next 2 years that could grow almost three times. So, how are carriers responding to this? How should they respond to this to be prepared and to address this? I know you mentioned, book earlier and flexibility, but can you kind of get a little deeper into that?
As to how carriers are dealing with the situation,
Yes. Like how
ah,
carriers and then by extension how shippers are kind of adjusting to how the carriers are responding.
right, okay, so carriers, they're increasing the pay for the drivers and also improving the conditions of the drivers. Um, Also, the technology is improving the efficiency, routing, load matching, and TMS,
Hmm.
which will improve. This will also help the shippers be able to track their cargo and know where it is. Also, the other thing that's coming on board is autonomous trucking, which is not near term, but eventually that's what's going to happen is autonomous trucking. On a shipper takeaway, be a preferred shipper, reliable schedules, good facilities, and accurate information to be provided. Difficult shippers can get uh, deprioritized and in tight markets.
So be a good customer, and the truckers and the carriers will want to work with you more and
Yes.
be more flexible for you. That makes total sense. Can you talk a little bit more about TMS? It's maybe not a term everyone is familiar with, so I would love for you to expand on that a little bit.
Well, the truck management service, it allows the shipper to have like lifetime visibility as to where your truck is.
Hmm.
So, you know, they can always look the dashboard. They might have accessibility to it, and they can see where that driver is and where their load is. And perhaps if they're being delayed or something, then they can contact the carrier directly and see what they're doing about it as well.
Gotcha. I imagine that all these changes are having an impact on the cost dynamics. Can you kind of give people a sense of what those cost dynamics are looking like right now? Maybe not necessarily specific rates, but more the forces that are kind of pushing them and how that impact is, influencing the industry.
Well, the major cost for drivers is the fuel, and as
Hmm.
everybody's aware, hopefully they've been listening to the news.
Hmm.
Fuel prices have been going up, which is you know due to the war in the Middle East. But before the war started, fuel was about the diesel um, $3.80 a gallon. Now it's in some places over $5.
Oh wow.
You also have insurance. Insurance has been increasing, labor, and equipment as well. You got to maintain the equipment. So all these trucks have to be maintained in order for it to be available when the load's available. You also have the ELD, the electronic logging device that was mandated. Um, ELDs didn't just digitize logs; they just turned driver time into hard, non-negotiable constraints. Most delays today aren't about distance; they're about running out of legal driving time for the driver. And then you
So
have the
go ahead.
yes, go ahead.
No, no, please continue. I'm so sorry.
Um, you also have the contract rates versus spot market dynamics,
Hmm.
which are different, and LTL pricing complexity,
Hmm.
which you got to make sure you know your freight class, your dimensional weight, and you also have those accessorial charges that you have to be familiar with. Otherwise, those can increase your rates on your load.
Very interesting. Thank you. So I wanna touch on something that you mentioned because it's really relevant. It's not only relevant to the U.S. You mentioned, running out of driving time and, the drivers being limited by the amount of hours they can work. So I want to pivot to something that's really relevant to a lot of our customers because SGL's focus is on U.S. exports to Japan and the Asia Pacific
Uh,
region. So, can you explain what people in the industry have been calling Japan's 2024 problem? Because I think a lot of U.S. exporters are maybe not fully connecting the dots on this, and it's kind of been happening in the background. But it's starting to impact more directly people who are exporting to Japan.
so you have the overtime cap for the drivers that started in April of 2024. This affected Japan's logistics system, which relied on long driver hours to compensate for the driver shortage, aging workforce, and a growing e-commerce demand in Japan. Um, Japan is heavily reliant on trucking for domestic freight, and there is now less trucking capacity to move those goods, which significant projected capacity shortfalls. Um, Results affecting this is the port congestion, delivery delays, especially on the long haul freight, which increase the cost of trucking, and supply chain disruption and pressure on manufacturers and retailers.
So then what does that actually look like for a US exporter shipping into Japan? Where does that show up in their supply chain? Because obviously it has a deep impact on people, in Japan shipping in within Japan, but for US exporters who may not have as much awareness of it, what what impact are they looking at?
Right, that's a good question. So yeah, once cargo arrives at Japan's port, it's harder to arrange inland pickup to arrange for that final delivery to the destination. So you have increased domestic trucking costs. U.S. exporters can see price pressure and the need to negotiate or renegotiate Incoterms or the price structure on their shipments. For U.S. exporters, you're now dealing with markets where moving goods inside the country is becoming harder, slower, and a little more expensive. To cope, Japan is shifting toward rail and coastal shipping, consolidating shipments, and fewer deliveries. Exporters need to adjust packaging to utilize full truck and palletized loads and reduce those small load or small lot shipments.
And I imagine, not necessarily unexpected, but situations like Shunto, where they have the annual port labor negotiations, and then things like the very unfortunate earthquake that happened a few weeks ago can also have a really significant impact in kind of conjunction with the 2024 problem.
Right.
Um, yes.
Yeah, go ahead. No, finish.
Oh, I was gonna say, but Japan is investing in solutions to this. One of the most interesting things to me, when you think about the kind of technology that they're using to address it, things like the new Shinkansen, or autonomous trucking trials, which we did talk about very briefly. We just talked about autonomous trucking in the United States, and we actually on SGL's website we covered autonomous trucking in one of our Japan export briefs. But can you speak to where Japan is heading on this and what it means for exporters watching from the US?
Right. So the Japan 2024 issue that we spoke about, that has caused Japan not to experiment out of curiosity. Um, it's redesigning logistics out of necessity. Um, Japan is actively piloting autonomous freight on highways, deploying hub to hub autonomous routes. Um, these developments focus on long haul highway segments and the 24/7 utilization of will to offset uh, the labor gaps that they're currently going through. Now, the you mentioned the recent earthquake, which illustrates the pattern that roads, rail, power infrastructure can be disrupted at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So you have damage to roads, bridges, which will force detours on the shipments and cause delays.
Yeah, so it's important to have kind of a variety of dynamic ways that you can adjust and address things and kind of contingency upon contingency plan to manage your supply chain in the instance of something unexpected like an earthquake or, you know, unexpected damage, things like that. Um,
Yes.
and actually, I want to touch on the poll results because it seems that the biggest trucking headache from our viewers has been delays and missed timelines. And one of the, I feel like a major cause of delays is those kind of unexpected problems. They can deeply affect timelines. So let's talk a little more about technology and trucking, just very briefly, because we're getting a little close to time. Autonomous vehicles, AI, digital freight platforms, what do you think is actually changing today that a shipper is going to notice versus what might be more long term or more theoretical? You can kind of expand a little bit on what you've already said, but I'm curious, just that area specifically, and whether you think automation will replace truck drivers entirely in the future.
All right. So autonomous trucks are real, uh, but they're not going to be replacing trucking right now. Um, Right now, they're a highway long haul solution, and they're operating on a few controlled lanes with limited scale and heavy constraints. So,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. Autonomous trucks won't disrupt all of trucking. They'll standardize the middle. The highway becomes predictable and scalable.
Hmm.
While the first and last mile remain human variables and operationally complex. You also have regulation, which is coming, but we're still in the framework building phase. But I think autonomous trucks would, like maybe in about 7 to 10 years, you'll see more autonomous trucks on the highways. And I know that there's specifically in Texas, in California, in Arizona, they're already having trials of autonomous trucks moving from hub to hub. Like in the Houston, you would have, we currently see Houston to Dallas or Houston to Austin.
So, because to me, I think that American roads are a lot more complex and a lot more chaotic, you would say, and maybe it's just because I live in New Jersey and the roads have always been chaotic here. But I feel like it's definitely a big challenge to integrate that kind of technology um, into our road systems specifically. I feel like they're a little less predictable, maybe just by the nature of the way people drive here in the U.S.
Yes, I can see it where the long haul, it would work fine for the long
Mhm.
haul, but those short distances in the city would get very complicated to deal with.
Yeah.
Um, but you're seeing the autonomous, uh, now in city operations being tested. So it's coming.
That's all. That's awesome to hear. It's a little scary, but I am excited about where this new technology can go.
Yes, I mean, it'll really help out, but
Yeah.
yes, and there's going to be, um, regulations and laws that have to be passed to meet these needs.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Wilson. This has been a really interesting conversation. And I think the thing that's standing out the most to me is just how often the trucking leg gets treated like it's such a simple element, but it's often the part where everything goes wrong.
Yes.
Um, so next, I want to just mention before we open up for the Q&A, next month we will be bringing back fan favorite Ray Minot to do the last part of our 4-part webinar series on modes of transport, and that is going to be Freight Unfiltered, what your ocean freight assumptions are costing you. So please feel free to attend that. I will get the registration link up right now. We would love to have you attend. Um, but if anyone has a question, this is the time to ask. Wilson is here, happy to answer your questions about trucking. Um, One thing that I think I would be very curious to hear uh, from you, Wilson, is I have my notes here. How far in advance do you think shippers are really booking trucks right now? Like, especially for something like port drayage, how far in advance?
Well, for port drayage, you definitely need at least 24-hour notice. I've been seeing people book their freight like weeks in advance, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
that's even better if you can give the carrier 2 weeks notice of when your cargo is going to be ready. This way they
mm-hmm,
can schedule those trucks a lot better.
mm-hmm,
But for port drayage, I understand that there's limited time and you don't want to run into the detention time on the container. So at least 24 hours
mm-hmm.
is ideal.
Thank you. And then one last question, unless anybody else in the chat has questions. Um, what for someone shipping from the US to Japan right now, what is your or someone who's shipping with domestically within Japan, what's your single most important piece of advice on the inland leg?
I would think that, providing the information or as much information on your freight um, would be great for the carrier to, schedule it and be able to meet your time constraints.
Wonderful. Well, Wilson, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Attendees, thank you so much for attending. You get a free consultation with an SGL team member. The link for that is right on the screen. And you will also be getting in your email in about 30 minutes, a free copy of our Which Transport Method is Right for You guide as it relates to trucking. This guide is part 3. We have 2 other parts that are available as well. You can reach out to us for that. If you have any questions or you have thoughts on what you would like to see next month in our webinar or in a future webinar, please let us know. Please fill out that consultation form. We would love to chat with you. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much for attending, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye, Jessa. Good to see
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.